Welcome in this session. My name is Jan-Pieter Lips, and I head up the retail and hospitality solution in Adyen. Before I go into the content of this presentation, I want to make two practical remarks. If you want to see the presentation bigger than you want to see me, you can double-click the presentation. And secondly, we very much invite you to ask questions. So if you could post your questions in the chat box, then at the end of the presentation, the moderator, Amanda, will ask you to ask your question. So the topic of today's presentation is retail customer insights. And I want to start with a challenge. And the challenge is that one that is applicable for many or most, even or all businesses. We know we can serve our customers better when we understand them better. And this is something which is happening because customer expectations are increasing about the extent to which companies build their journeys around the customer. And if you're not doing it, then your competitors will probably be doing it, or companies in other industries will be raising those expectations. Now, there's an abundance of valuable data around. There's data coming from e-commerce interactions. There is data from Google, who know what you're looking for. Facebook knows who your friends are. Everybody walking around with a smartphone leaves a trail of location data. So there's a lot of data around, but a lot of companies that I speak to are saying, you know, where do I start? What is really important? And what's really important, in my view, is the data that you have as retailers and as hospitality companies. What people buy, how much they spend, how often they come, where they go. That is the kind of data that is important as a starting point for your understanding of your customers. Now, you may say, I don't have all that data. I don't know when customers buy online and the same customers buy in my stores. Or there are people who go to my stores who come in and out, and I don't know how to link them to their prior transactions. And that is an area, of course, where we can help, because Adyen has a single platform. So all payments come together in the same platform. So companies that consolidate their payments with Adyen, they can use that data to create customer insight and to drive engagement. Now, I want to talk about how that is done. Today, I want to make this really a practical session. But before I do that, I want to do something that is sometimes overlooked. And that is, what is the so what? What's the action? What's the insight? What is the consequence of a piece of insight? Because too often, insight or data is viewed as interesting, but those questions are not always asked. So, what is the so what? So, I'll show a few examples of work that we do with our merchants around this data, and it often starts with a simple Pareto principle. So this is the anonymized data of one of our merchants, but it's not untypical that you would find 20% of customers generate 60% or more of turnover, of sales. And once you know that, it immediately raises a number of questions. For example, who are these people? What are they buying? How can I get more of them? How can I retain them? And this is the kind of insight that leads many companies to create loyalty programs. Like, for example, Joe and the Juice. So Joe and the Juice wanted to create a loyalty program and they wanted it to be tiered. They wanted to have status. For example, the first gray, then purple, then yellow, gold, all the way up to the most elite status. And they had a pretty good idea of how many customers they wanted to have in each of these different segments. So a very select few in the top segment, and a bit more in the penultimate, and more in the first buckets. But what they didn't know was what people need to do to actually qualify for a segment. And that's the kind of information they could use payments data for, because with the payments data, they had a complete distribution of their customers. They knew how many customers are coming 5 times, 10 times, 50 times, 100 times. So using that information, they were able to design their loyalty program. And then, of course, the next challenge becomes, how do you measure the impact of a loyalty program? Because quite often, particularly in point-of-sale environments, the loyalty program is the source of all customer data, or most customer data. And if you look at in marketing, for example, how do you measure the impact of a marketing campaign or mailing? You use a control cell. So you send the mailing to 95% of the selected people, and then the 5% you don't send it to, and you compare the two segments. But with a loyalty program, if all your data comes from your loyalty program, what do you compare it against? And this is another very good application of payments data. So if you look at this example, the moment the loyalty program launches, the green bar is those people who are in the loyalty program. But with payments data, you can look back. You can look at what they were doing before the program launched. And then since the launch of the program, you can compare the behavior of those people in the program with those people who are not in the program. Another use of data we see regularly is to look at flows of shopper across different locations and different channels. This is an example of a retailer in the US, in the New York area. For them, we looked at the location of their e-commerce customers, which are the green dots. So the darker the green, the higher the concentration of customers, and the red dots are their locations. So what you can see is in Philadelphia, in Boston, you see quite a lot of e-commerce customers and no location. So at the very least, the question now is, should they open doors should they open stores in those locations? And the next question is, what happens when you open a store? So we had one of our merchants who had a very active store opening program, and every time they opened a store, they had a business case for that store. So they would have a spreadsheet, and one line item in there is cannibalization. And they realized when you open a new store that not all the sales of that store and not all the customers are net new to the company. Some customers will actually have shopped before or normally in other locations. So not all of that is incremental. The only issue was that they had no way of measuring that. So what we were able to do with the payments data is actually say quite exactly when a new store opens, right here in the middle, that the blue bar is net new customers. The green bar is people who used to go to store 1, store 2, store 3, and store 4. And you can see the same logic applying to store closings, which in today's environment is quite opportune for quite a few retailers. What happens when you close a store? Do customers go to other stores? Do they go online, or have they defected to the competition? Now, this whole interplay of what happens in stores and what happens online is also a very interesting subject, the whole omni-channel question. What is the value of an omni-channel shopper? Is my website a competition for my stores, or is it complementary, or is it adding value? What we quite often see is that omni-channel shoppers are worth more than people who only come in the e-commerce channel or people who only come in the point of sale channel. And And when you realize that, then that may lead you to take different actions. It may lead you to promote your e-commerce channel in your stores, with something normally intuitively you may not have done. The other thing you can do to stimulate this is to create true omni-channel journeys. One example of a journey like that is buy online and return in store. It's a journey that customers really like. It's a journey that store staff don't always really like, because somebody buys something online, they haven't sold the product, they come into the store, they have to do something with the product. It can be an operational hassle. But of course, every visit to a store is an opportunity to sell the customer something incremental, something new. And what we did for this retailer was to look at online sale and return in store, and then calculate for in what percentage of cases and visits were actually the customers buying something completely new. So in what percentage were those return visits converted into new sales? And you see some really interesting differences between different stores. So the best stores, they had about 30% conversion. So in 30% of the cases that somebody returned a product, the store was able to sell them something completely new. Some of the other stores on the right, low single digit. So what's the difference between these stores? What are the stores on the left doing that the stores on the right are not doing when it comes to the location of their service counter, the training of their staff, the incentivization, etc.? And once you can put a metric on it, you can try to improve it. Now, omnichannel has always been an interesting subject, but of course the COVID crisis has really put a spotlight on omnichannel. This is an example of one of our merchants, anonymized, where you see before the crisis, the green bars are point of sale transactions, the blue bars are e-commerce transactions. You see in a very short space of time, the stores closing, you see e-commerce shooting up, more than a factor 4 increase in e-commerce, and also at a higher average transaction value than the stores. So this was a crazy time. And this retailer was having a discussion between the CEO and the CMO. So the CEO was saying, you know, what's happening here, it's not that exciting. It's people who otherwise would have gone to the store are now buying online. And the CMO was saying, well, I'm not so sure. I think a lot of those people who we see online are actually new to our business. They're people that otherwise maybe wouldn't have bought with us. And that's the question they came to us with. So we looked at it, and we looked at purely at the e-commerce shoppers. So for every person who made an e-commerce transaction in this whole time period, what had they done before? So the blue bar is people who were already a customer at this retailer, but only in point of sale. And then the green bar is people who had been before, they were a customer, but they'd only bought in e-commerce or e-commerce and store. And then the orange bar is new shoppers, completely new to the brand. And what this shows is that the vast majority of e-commerce shoppers, particularly in the COVID period, were new to this retailer. And that means that there's new people that they need to understand. There's people they now want to track. There's people they want to kind of make come back. They want to know if they return, if they go to their store, etc. Knowing that these are new people for this retailer was a really important insight. And then the last example I want to give is more around customer location. So a lot of merchants have a really important business with tourists or people from other countries. This is an example of a retailer, one of our merchants in London. So they have a number of stores in London, and they wanted to know, where do our customers come from? And what this shows, for example, is that people from China and US, they spend more than actually the people from the UK, from the homeland. And so China being the big blue dot, somewhere right up the middle, and US being the green dot. People from the United Kingdom, they make a lot of transactions, but significantly lower average transaction value. Really completely different profile of customer. I mean, it's important to understand that. People from Hong Kong, which is the red dot on the right, and of course the x-axis is the average transaction value. People from Hong Kong, you know, having a significantly higher average spend per transaction than anyone else. And you compare them to people from Japan, for example, which is the purple dot more on the left. People from Hong Kong spend more than twice as much And what I was now wanting to talk about is how you can take advantage of these shopper insights, which broadly you can do in one of two ways. On the left, we can give you the data you need to link different transactions, and you can take that in your own environment, use that to combine different transactions into a view of the customer, and do all of the analytics that I've just shown you yourself, but also add it to other information that you have, like product level information, etc. I'll talk about that a little bit later. And on the right of this slide, we're also trying to make it really easy and accessible for you to get some insights in our environment. So the examples I showed are examples that we've created, but increasingly we want to do this through dashboards. We've just launched our first dashboard, which is an omni-channel dashboard. It shows how many shoppers are shopping in-store, how many in e-commerce, how many omni-channel, how many new customers versus returning customers. Normally, this omni-channel dashboard looks quite stable, but of course, this year with COVID, it's a treasure trove of insight. There's so much happening on this slide. You can look at what the average transaction value is of people who transact in these different channels, how that changes over time, etc. So this is available in the customer area, which is our portal for our clients. And over the course of next year, we'll be adding a number of other dashboards for you to have really easy, direct access to them. But a lot of benefits you can also get, and arguably more benefits, is by actually ingesting our data. What we can give you is for every payment, we can give you a unique value that represents the account number, the card number, the PAN of the card that was used for the payment. Now, the PAN itself, you never want to store in a marketing system or any other system because it's, of course, highly sensitive. But the card alias is completely safe to put in the CRM system or the like. So we can share that with you. And then whenever a transaction comes in through any channel, you can use that alias to connect that transaction to prior transactions that were performed by the same card and therefore by the same person. And we can also add in some more information. So we can give you, for example, shopper origin, so the information used to understand where shoppers come from. We can give you funding source, which is it a prepaid debit card or a credit card or a regular debit? We can give you payment account reference where it's available, which you can use to connect a wallet like Apple Pay to the underlying payment cards. And we can share this information with you in one of two ways. For point of sale payments, we can share it during the transaction. So if you look at the graph on the right, the payment card has been tapped or entered in the terminal, and the terminal talks to the Adyen platform during the payment. And the first thing that the platform will do is to look up, are there any shopper details that we are aware of, and give them back to the terminal. The terminal then passes it on to the cash register, and from there on, it can enter any CRM system or other system. So that's one way of doing it. It's real time during the transaction. It also enables you to do other things with that information, and we'll talk about that a little bit more later. The other way in which we can share it, which is applicable to point of sale, but also to any other channel like e-commerce, is to give you the information just after the transaction. So the transaction takes place as normal, and then straight after we send you a notification with all the details in there, including the transaction reference, the merchant reference, which you can then use to connect that payment, that information to the information that you hold on the transaction, and that way you can populate your database. So two different ways of achieving this. So we talked about some examples of insight. We talked about how we can provide the insight to you. And insight really is performed on groups of customers. So you want to understand how certain segments or groups of customers respond, how they act. It's done typically at an aggregated level, and it's pretty much where things should start. But we also have some opportunities to make it personal, to give you an opportunity to directly connect with consumers. And I want to share with you two examples of that. One is the use of the terminal, and Brian earlier on in the plenary session gave some examples of that. Because of the way we work with the terminal, and because our recent terminal range works with terminal API, meaning there's very little intelligence in the terminal itself, and it's really APIs talking to the terminal either from your cash register or from our platform. It makes them devices where you can interact with customers. You can show a text, a personalized text. You can show a picture. You can ask a question, and this is what increasingly merchants are doing. So, and this is an example of a retailer in the Netherlands, a bicycle retailer, appropriately, and they ask at the end of every transaction, the satisfaction of the customer with that transaction. And they can use that information to track satisfaction over time, compare between stores. They can even, in their own system, link it to what people had bought. So, are certain products generating less or more satisfaction, etc. But it doesn't have to be customer satisfaction. It could be any question. If one day you may want to ask, have you seen our TV advertisement? Or do you feel safe shopping here? Which in COVID times is quite a relevant question. All those questions, it's completely flexible. You can ask on the terminal in a very kind of cost-efficient way. The other thing I want to mention is omni-channel shopper recognition. And that's really using the payment card, the payment credentials to identify shoppers in a one-to-one situation. And that really starts with linking the payment details with a reference that is unique to a customer. So in a payment, if you instruct us and say, listen, store this card under this reference, which could be a unique customer number, it could be a loyalty ID, it could be an email address, then we will do that. And then in all the future occurrences that payment card is used in any channel in your business, we will give you back the shopper information that you registered this account, this card under initially. So we can give that to you in the two ways I described earlier. So in terminal response, straight to the terminal, or as a notification. And you can then use that information to link different transactions reliably to shoppers. You can even link multiple payment cards to a shopper. So if people use multiple cards, then all of that will flow into the same shopper in terms of your perspective. We have some merchants that look up the customer's details. So let's say they have an endless aisle in their stores. Customer pays for something in the terminal, but the product is going to be home delivered. And some of our merchants take the reference, look up the details of the customer, and then say, listen, do you still live in this address? Rather than the customers having to give them all that information again and again. It's a great application for e-receipts. I always get a little bit frustrated that every time I buy something, I'm asked for an email address for an electronic receipt. This enables you to do that only once. And then next time you just remember it and you remind the customer. It's also a great way of running a loyalty program. And for example, this is an implementation we're currently doing with Dunkin' Donuts in the Netherlands. They have a loyalty app where their loyalty program lives. That's where people can look at how many points they have and how they can use their points. Now, in the app, you can also store card details. So you can tokenize a payment card because Dunkin' has a pre-order functionality. So you can pre-order your coffee and then it's ready, waiting for you. So when people have stored a payment card in the app, that's what they can then do. Now, the regular process, if you haven't pre-ordered and you go to Dunkin' for a coffee, then the way the loyalty program works is you take out your phone, you find the app, you fire up the QR code, and you scan the QR code. And that is the way you identify yourself. That's your loyalty card. But that's quite a hassle for just buying a cup of coffee. And it takes quite a bit of time. And it's not the most customer-friendly experience. So what we're enabling is when a customer, they may have their phone in their pocket. When they use the card that was also stored in the app, when they use that card on the terminal, we send a notification to the loyalty company that Dunkin' uses. They send a notification to the customer saying, welcome back, you've just earned another 15 points. The customer maybe then clicks on it, is drawn into the app, that drives mobile engagement. But basically what's happened here is that the payment card was turned into the loyalty card. Without the customer having to do anything, without the staff, importantly, having to do anything. So really, really seamless experience. And it's still an engaging experience because of these notifications. Now you can imagine when you combine the ability to recognize customer by the payment card And the way you can use a payment terminal for interaction, you can create some really interesting and customer-friendly flows. This is one that I would love to see more of, which is, welcome back. Would you like your e-receipt to be sent to this address? Yes, please. I don't want to spell it every time. Welcome. Would you like to sign up for our loyalty program? Really easy. I say yes. Maybe I fill in my email address. Maybe I fill in my mobile phone number and get sent a registration link for the loyalty program. And then next time, I'm automatically recognized. And that's really what we're doing here. So we're creating this virtuous circle where customer comes into store, they present their payment card, we do a lookup if there is any shopper details available, which are then passed back if they're available. And if they are available, then the journey is one of welcome back, which maybe is shown on the terminal. Maybe a loyalty balance is shown on the terminal. Maybe they're asked if they want to receive their e-receipt, whatever the action then is. And then the payment is processed as normal. Now, if the shopper details are not available, then it's an opportunity to ask the customer for them, to ask them to sign up for the loyalty program or to give their email address, which can be done either in a terminal or in the cash register. You can ask the customer if they want you to remember their details. We then store the payment card and the customer reference at our end in Adyen, and the payment is processed. And of course, the next time this customer comes into the store, they're in the top flow. They're in the recognized flow. So increasingly, you're turning customers from anonymous customers into known customers in a way that doesn't require any effort for them or for your staff. Now, I want to conclude with a little video, and this is really the way this plays out in the area of loyalty programs, because we're quite used to having a wallet bulging with plastic cards, carrying around stamp cards, having to kind of spell our email address all the time. But really, when you think about it, these companies are asking you to identify yourself twice. Giving an email address or showing a loyalty card is a form of identification, but so is payment. So you're identifying yourselves twice. And our vision is that you should only really have to do that once. So by using the payment card as a loyalty card. So we'll see a quick video that explains that.
Customer loyalty. It's the love your customers show you when your brand offers them conveniences, discounts, and points. But why have customers spell out their email? Or use punch cards or reward cards if you can make it easier? Adyen helps clear the way. We can link payment cards to your loyalty program, so they can get rewarded whenever and wherever they shop with you. Plus, you get more customer insights, so you can return the love. Adyen, give your customers the loyal treatment.
So that concludes the presentation. Again, apologies for the technical issues. Amanda, do we have time for some questions?
Hello. Yes, we do have time, and we do have a couple of questions, JP. If you're willing to take them, I can read you the first one from Shiva, who I see is still in the room, so I'll go ahead and ask that question. So the first one is, does Adyen share consumer data with merchants? Can you shed light into how we can access these insights and if we can pull consumer insights data into our internal data intelligence systems?
Yeah, Shiva, so thanks for the question. The data that we hold is actually the merchant's data, and that's also very much how we treat it. So it is the data, it is your data, it is the data of the merchant. We have it, of course, in a slightly different way, and there's some information that we add to it. And that information we're very happy to share in the ways that I explained, so with notifications to a terminal or to another endpoint. And then when you receive that information, you can include it in any system that you want to.
Perfect. And then we actually have one follow-up to that I'll ask as well. Why do you think Adyen is well placed to be a good source of omni-channel shopping behavior? I presume it's based on signals such as consumer using the same card, email address, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, that's a good question, and that is pretty much what it is. So what's unique about Adyen is that single platform. So a lot of other payment companies have grown through acquisitions, and they have different platforms for different channels. Or merchants choose to have different providers for online and in-store, and maybe another one for a kiosk or for mobile POS. So because payments can be consolidated with Adyen, and there is a single platform, all the information comes back into the same place. And then because we're a tech company, we're very flexible in then being able to share that information out through notifications or payment responses. So where the big value sits is actually our ability to help you connect the dots between different transactions.
Great. And I think that concludes our questions for now, JP. So thank you, everyone, for joining. Thank you, JP, for working through those technical difficulties. And I think the next session will start in about 10 minutes.
Right. Well, enjoy the rest of the conference. Thank you very much.